Thank you. We've got a pretty diverse set of panelists, as you can see. First step, I want to do a quick intro, but a few seconds on 10x growth, right? Everybody wants 10x plus. How do you see the macroeconomic environment for that? Very quickly, is this an environment where we can see 10x growth? There's a view that technology is your best friend in a potential downturn or even a short-term blip. So where do you see this in the markets you serve?
Maybe I can get started. First of all, hi everybody. Sindhu Gangadharan, Senior Vice President and Managing Director of SAP Labs India. Been with SAP for close to 2 decades. Started off in Labs India and in '99 and moved to Germany. Held several leadership roles in technology and back to India now in just as of September to be precise. And I think that's a fantastic question, and this is also one of the reasons that I'm super excited to be back in India and actually driving some of the conversations that that lead to this 10x growth, right? And I think yesterday that was also kind of the main conversation, and Debjani, you were in the news today where you were quoted as well. But if I just reflect back a bit, in order to support that kind of growth, I think there's a lot that we need to do as an ecosystem. Skilling on the emerging tech is something that we're deeply passionate about. And recently, we also signed a MOU with NASSCOM as well in terms of how can we as a company help in that skilling on emerging tech, be it AI, ML, blockchain, cloud computing, mobile tech, and so on. And in addition to that, I think we are definitely passionate about it, but at the same time, as an economy and as an ecosystem, I think we also have to go more from a design-led approach to innovation, which I think is very unique and which is much needed in the market as of today. And besides that, if you ask me, there's also a lot to be done when we're talking about building out an ecosystem of smart product managers. Because I think what is very important, and I think we've excelled as a nation when it comes to tech and innovation, but I think it's also important when we talk about end-to-end ownership of products, that knowledge, and in terms of having that kind of expertise on understanding your products, understanding what customers want, and then tapping into those areas which can lead to those kind of innovative growths in those areas where we definitely have to do a lot more, which will drive that kind of growth. And just looking at the economy here, I think all of you would also agree that there are certain areas where we've gone in and we've been leaders, be it in the fintech space. I think that was a need that resulted in that kind of innovation. And there's so much more that needs to happen just on the drive here. If I just reflect back, one of the challenges that we all face is the whole transportation and mobility, right? Think about it as an opportunity. Or if I just look at agri-tech, or if I just look at other areas where tech can really play that kind of differentiating role. Those are the areas or security or data in general. These are those areas where we can use that to kind of drive that kind of growth. So very passionate about it and super excited to see that kind of change.
Absolutely. Thank you. Looks like lots of opportunity. Talent is going to be important, right? So, Arun?
Hi, good morning. My name is Arun Batra. I head the advisory services at Global Delivery Services, Ernst & Young. We are basically the prime integrated service delivery partner for all the EY member firms. And technology is a very core engine for EY. So just to let you know, we do sometimes associate EY as a part of the professional four as a traditional audit business. But there is obviously a lot of convergence that is happening, and technology is very core to what we deliver to our clients. You talked of 10x. So while, whether it is 1x, 10x, 5x, etc., we will not get into the semantics on that. But clearly, when we, from a pure business perspective, from what we see in the markets, we are seeing technology come into the core around which the solutions will be built, rather than technology at the outer, where it becomes an enabler to a problem, solving a problem. So when we go to our clients, we see a huge amount of demand where we can bring the technology and create solutions around that. We have entered into a lot of new deals, engagements, where we are disrupting the market, disrupting the traditional players. And how we are disrupting it by bringing the power of the startup community. into the solution mix. So we are not a product company, we are a services company. But what we do is there is a lot of quality or capable solutions which exist in the market today. And we try to bring that power to the clients. So it helps us deliver solutions in a much more agile manner. And that opens up new market segments. Market segments which are not traditionally thought of. So technology is helping us address new market segments, new opportunities, and that is what I would call is the big opportunity for each one of us. It is reflected in the growth, our growth as well as the market growth, but I'm just talking purely from a pure global perspective. The opportunity is really significant, and India, irrespective of whatever we hear or read, I see only a lot of positive coming out of from the India story still, right? I think the challenges which some of the players in India are is because of the portfolio mix. But if you churn your portfolio mix, which is aligned to the future, then the opportunity is very significant. That's what we see.
Very well said. Hari?
Yeah, I think technology definitely is key and very important, but it's also in many ways becoming more and more of sort of a table stakes, if you will, right? Meaning that it's become a great leveler, right? With advances in cloud and the ubiquity of cheap hardware and software and so on, it's become more and more easy for companies to get in and start competing and open up whole new vistas. But really, any kind of growth eventually also has to come down to a fundamental understanding of customer needs, right? Both the explicitly expressed needs as well as the unmet needs. And then using technology as a way to innovate on behalf of the customer to address those unmet needs. So until and unless you understand who your customer is and what is it that they truly need, expressed explicitly or otherwise, you're really not going to be able to achieve the kind of hyper growth. And the other thing that in the spirit of this, the subject of this panel discussion, I think even though the word ecosystem is much overused and very cliched, I think it is critical, right? In many ways for companies to be able to scale. As an example, if you take a look at mobile, right? I mean, the smartphone market, you can argue that the smartphone is ubiquitous today because of advances in, chip development and chip design, because of, advances in networking, which allows you to leverage and move massive amounts of data to a device that can fit in your pocket, right? So, and that would not have been possible without an ecosystem of multiple players coming together, agreeing to cooperate with each other while still competing in different areas, and really saying, okay, through that competition, cooperation, we can create the push and pull of really allowing a whole new segment to be created in a matter of, a decade or less. And that's also empowering hundreds of millions of people across the world, right? I mean, everybody in India today has a phone that they're using to transact, which is unthinkable. If you look at the amount of, you just have to walk across Bangalore to any street and you have vendors who are using Paytm. If you ask them 10 years ago what was Paytm, they wouldn't have an idea of how to express that. Right? So I think it's also understanding how you can really enable customer behavior to change and empower their lives, right? And I think as long as you're focusing on that, growth will naturally follow.
Awesome. So clearly there's optimism. Diving quickly into the topic, right, and we'll start with you, Hari, is that startups and companies here are going to say, okay, I have this idea, I'm building this product, but who is likely to compete with me? Who is likely to be my visible competition? That's clearly the fear in a startup's mind. And, traditional management thinking is competition is good. It gets you to move faster. But then once you get past that, the cooperation part, right? Who do I, partner with, cooperate with? So what I want to do is maybe with your panel's permission, we'll frame the discussion at 3 or 4 levels, right? Partnership at a tech level, partnership at probably a platform level, partnership probably at a GTM level, and then partnership at the money level. So maybe I'll start you with the tech level, right? How do you see competition at the tech level? And this gives a framework for the audience and the startup founders to start say, okay, at what levels do I want to partner? How?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, right? Because unless you really understand who your customer is and what business you're in, you really don't know who your competitor is. I'll give you a sort of rather fanciful example, right? If you take Uber or Lyft, in most urban areas in the US certainly today, you could argue that they're actually competing with the parking lot owners and operators, right? Because if fewer people are driving their own cars to work, there's less need for public parking, which means that, eventually the public parking vendors are going to see their revenues dip, right? How do they react to that? Did they even think about it? Or did Uber even think about, okay, I'm actually disrupting and putting out of business an entire sort of real estate segment that, just blocks and blocks of real estate in downtown, in any city in downtown, in any city in the US, which are just occupied by parking garages, right? Did Uber even think about, well, actually they're in competition
So
with
it's
the
almost
parking.
like an unseen
It's almost an unseen competition, right? Yeah. So that's one part of it. So for a startup, thinking about who my competition is, you have to be very, very clear what business are you in, and therefore, how do I compete? So if I'm Uber, I have to also appeal to people who may potentially be taking metro, and I have to make it easier for them. And in some cases, I have to decide that, I will cooperate with the metro. So I will create clusters of drivers in areas which will allow them to go from their homes to the metro station, knowing that they're not likely going to put up with a 2-hour ride across Bangalore. But they may be willing to use.
It's not just who's competitive in terms of features to you, but
exactly.
where in the value chain
right?
they belong.
Exactly. So that's one part of it. And then I can make on the follow-on discussion of, therefore, now, how do I build my platform and product stack appropriately, right? So I will make very different decisions on how do I cluster and provide incentives to my cab drivers. I'll provide more incentives for them to serve shorter distances and longer distances possibly, right? And that'll have all sorts of implications of how I build my technology stack, how I think about my product. So I think unless you start sort of peeling the layers of the onion of truly understanding who your competition is, and therefore, how do you provide eventually the right set of experiences for your customers, and therefore the right associated incentives for everyone in the value chain, it's going to be really, really hard for you to really wrap your hands around the problem.
Great. Sindhu, I want to quickly jump on you. SAP and Microsoft have been talking of very interesting. So that's a pretty recent example of a phenomenal partnership. Your field force probably compete on things on the ground, but there's so much alignment from a core. So can you talk about that? I mean, how did that come out? What's the value to customers, and where did the lines between partnership and competition change?
Sure. But maybe before I start on the Microsoft SAP partnership, I just want to add a little bit on what Hari already mentioned, right? I think it's easy if you just keep following your competition and try to make sure that you're always on par. But I think the smarter thing to do is to understand what are the business outcomes that you're trying to achieve for your customers. Because if you focus on business outcomes, then it's how do you make sure that you get your customers to those business outcomes? And that can be done by you with your core expertise, but also in very close collaboration with partners. And this is a philosophy that we totally believe in at SAP, and we live that. And the Microsoft partnership is absolutely a statement that proves that kind of culture that we have at SAP. And actually, the partnership is not so new. Well, we strengthened it as well just in October, but this goes back all the way to 2017. Where we did have a larger strategy with many of our partners, including Microsoft, where we said, hey, we want our customers to do a lot more business innovation in the cloud. Now, in order to enable that business outcome for a customer, we very quickly know that our customers have very diverse landscapes, hybrid landscapes that go across cloud on-premise. And in order to make that transition for them super easy, we said, we're going to make sure that we work on very clear blueprints, solution architects, proposals, business journeys that map out for different segments of our customers. And then based on that, we identified, in some cases, of course, our own competition, who became our partners, to help customers in that business journey, but very clearly articulated based on business blueprints and solution architecture proposals that allowed them to take that path forward. And for concretely on the Microsoft partnership, what that translated into was a lot of customers of SAP are on that transition from, say, ECC to S4, right? And to help them ease that transition, this was also why we said we want to make sure that we join forces with the likes of Microsoft, with AWS, Google, come together and have a reference architecture in place to give the customers the choice, first of all, because it's also about choice, to choose the infrastructure of that they felt most comfortable with or had made a choice on. But at the same time, target goal being S4 move and getting them that quick access to the business applications that allowed them to get to those business outcomes, right? And what we did now to strengthen that partnership, that was called Project Embrace. And now in October, what we also did to strengthen that is we said we will also give customers the choice to have the cloud platform, which is our business technology platform, to be available on Azure and also as for HANA as well as on Azure. So that's the kind of, and this is a great example, like you said, Narendra, on how in order to get to that business outcome that we want our customers to get to, we definitely want to bring together the partners that help us to get there, and Microsoft being a great example here. Yes, we're fiercely competitive on some layers, no doubt about it, but at the same time, when we're clear for these business outcomes, we work in collaboration with them. Our field, you talked about go-to-market layers and the layers above as well. We're fully aligned on what kind of compensation models are in place for for the field as well, in order to that they are incentivized as well, so that it doesn't become a case of SAP sales versus Microsoft sales. For those of you who've worked in the field, you all know what that could translate into. So we've made that also eased out in order to enable that entire value chain to go across very smoothly.
Perfect. So Sindhu mentioned GTM. Arun, I want to come to you and say, clearly everybody who is trying to address a larger customer needs that sort of on-ramp or a little bit of training wheels to help get access to a larger customer, right? GTM, Enterprise Connects, different mechanisms. How do you see that? I mean, the audience clearly, the startup saying, okay, I've got this cool technology, I need to get to a larger customer, right? I need to get to that larger customer, not just at a POC level, but at a scale level, across the globe potentially. How could folks, in the audience take advantage of that kind of infrastructure?
Yeah. So I think that's where professional services firms like EY can help a lot. We are not in the product space, we are in the solution space. What does that mean? Our job, or the way we go to the market, is to solve a very specific business problem for a client, which means we will leverage whatever is the best of the breed that is available and bring it together and take it to the client. So we don't have any affinity to any specific product. Yes, we will analyze a specific product that it is relevant and contextual to my client, but it's not that we are competing with our own product. So what does that mean to let's say a startup which is bringing either a specialized technology or a specialized platform, right? Today, we have, and to protect the interest of the startup community, we obviously have a separate team as well to ensure that there isn't conflict. I'll come to that a little later. Now, what we do is when we go to the market, we can either go as an alliance partner or as an ecosystem partner to our client, and we go in a joint go-to-market solution. I will take two real-life cases that have happened very recently. So for our InsureWave solution, which is a blockchain-based marine insurance solution, right? We have leveraged a blockchain technology called Corda. For the front end, we have leveraged Microsoft, and for reporting engines, we have leveraged different startups. But when we go to the market, right, we go with Corda and Microsoft to our consumer, to a potential consumer, whether that is Maersk or the broker community. We don't go as individual sellers. Right, we want to bring the entire power of the community there. While those are big names, I also want to take a very recent example where we have partnered with. This is one of the top 3 property and casualty insurance companies, or general insurance company in the US market. They already have an existing platform with one of the largest industry providers, platform providers. But for a certain market segment, we have worked with an InsurTech, and we have worked with 6 different startups to build a solution, right, to address a specific segment for a specific product for one state right now. The advantage that has happened, usually, if you want to set up an insurance company from scratch, excluding the timeline for all the application licenses, which in US can take a very long time, keeping that timeline aside, just to do work with one of, let's say, the big product providers, it could take you minimum 15 months if you want to put a insurance company together. Here in 6 months, we've been able to put the entire solution together because existing sub-parts of the solution existed. When we go to a client, right, or potential client, we have gone together with that startup.
So would you say this acceleration in time happened, A, because of your mindset in terms of taking people, and B, because you have a bunch of very aggressive startup with very deep insights and vertical solutions, and you help them stitch it together?
Absolutely. See, startups at the end of the day, they are very agile in their execution. Large companies have their own set of bureaucratic challenges, problems, etc. And startups have very contextual solutions. We have to acknowledge that. When I say contextual, they're extremely relevant to a problem. Their ability to identify and build is faster. So when we go to our clients, right, we want to take the best of the breed. And we take the startups along with us. In fact, as recently as yesterday, the announcement is officially out. So I can say we have now tied up with a startup firm called Pros in the US, right, to leverage their AI solution. A few months back, we had tied up with a startup, again AI, Stratio for EMEA, for our European solutions. So these are startups. These are not big names. Sometimes people do get concerned, startups do get concerned, working with big names, etc. But I can tell you, we are a $36 billion firm. We are not a small firm. But even we don't hesitate to take the right startups. Of course, we'll do our due diligence and stuff around that.
Clearly, we need a lot more of that.
We take that forward. And what we bring to the table, right? We bring what we call a layer of trust. Okay, what that means is clients trust us, EY. They don't know the startup. For them to trust what you bring to the table. But we bring that layer of trust, and the startup brings the technology. And because we front end and bring the startup together, I think it makes a far more believable solution, which you can also take to the market. Otherwise, it would be extremely challenging, or I wouldn't say it may not be the most cost-effective proposition for a startup to start going to the market.
I think that's the key,
It is
right?
one of the areas, but it is not the only.
I think that's the key. You could go directly.
You could go directly, but yeah.
But it's a
you
choice.
should
And that's the
leverage.
theme, right? Where do you compete? Where do you partner? How do you grow? Hari, clearly, let's stay on that topic, right? Startups need that on-ramp. Startups need that acceleration, right? How does Walmart potentially help them across the globe? How can folks here take advantage of your capabilities and scale?
Yeah, so I'd like to take an example that's much more specific to the retail industry itself, right? And Walmart in many ways has been a pioneer in this concept. So as you know, we are the world's largest retailer. We sell literally hundreds of billions of dollars of goods every year. And so we have a very large network of suppliers. There are hundreds of thousands of suppliers across the world that we work with. And obviously those suppliers themselves are competing with each other for space in our shelves to be able to sell through Walmart, right? And the minute Walmart lets them put their wares in our stores, it automatically is going to help their sales jump dramatically, right? Forget 10x, in many cases it'll be hundreds and 200x. At the same time, what we did early on is we created a product called Retail Link. And what we made a very, very conscious decision is that we would actually look at supplier performance on a particular category by category level, aggregate it and anonymize it and share it off with all the suppliers. Now the first reaction for the supplier is, hey, wait a second, you're sharing the same data with my competition, right? And therefore you as a big customer are disadvantaging me in some ways. And traditionally we have not charged for that, right? So it's valuable insight that arguably we could make millions of dollars monetizing it. But what we've said is that really what we're going to do is we're going to sell it to the suppliers, because in many cases the suppliers themselves are too small. Like a typical startup, they may or may not have all the analytical capabilities and all the technology to be able to go understand those insights, and certainly not aggregated across, across the country or across a large geography, across multiple different demographies and so on. And so we sell that, we share that data very openly with our suppliers. But what we ask in return is that suppliers should use that in order to drive their cost down, because they now have a better understanding of customers. They know what's going to drive sales.
Just to clarify, is this restricted to the people who supply goods to you, or people who provide analytics and solutions to you can also use that?
No, so right now that primarily was focused with the suppliers, meaning the people
suppliers
who supply goods to us, right? And what we then did is we said, okay, now you drive
Sorry,
your prices
I'm
down.
just making business opportunity for the audience. So if somebody wanted to tap into that, they could probably work with one of your suppliers and say, hey, you have access to data, I'll help you.
Absolutely.
Right? So they could benefit from that and build analytics and give them intelligence,
yes,
right?
Exactly, right.
So, okay.
And they could work with us as well to essentially sort of roll out those analytical solutions.
Also.
Absolutely,
Wonderful.
right?
Okay.
And then when the suppliers are able to get more and more productive and efficient, they can then drive their costs down, which we then pass on to the customers in the form of reduced prices, right? So that's the reason why we've traditionally not charged our suppliers for access to that data.
How well kept is the secret? In terms of usage in India, do people use
Well,
it?
in terms of usage in India, it's probably not as prevalent, but in the US certainly. For example, our suppliers are all very well aware of it. We have almost all of our suppliers are participating in the retailing platform, and it's one of the very well-known sort of key differentiators in terms of both an approach as well as, it also helps, for example, the go-to-market for our suppliers.
So let's put you on the spot. I'm sure your LinkedIn is going to get spammed over the next few hours, but is there a way where people can reach out, or is there a mechanism or a developer program or access program which you would encourage people to take advantage of?
Yeah,
Sorry, I'm just throwing googlies at you.
No, I know. I think our retailing program is fairly well understood. So if you go into our website, it'll tell you how essentially you go about getting yourself onboarded as a supplier.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, we also have, for example, once a year, we do a showcase in the US, which is obviously our largest market, where we invite suppliers, local and regional and national suppliers, to come and show their wares. And if the products are really interesting and the merchants like it, then they will essentially give you a test market of a few tens of stores.
One more, maybe more specific. If I go talk to a diaper supplier to Walmart, and I know you sell a few diapers across the globe, I could potentially, if I'm a software analytics company, I could potentially work with the diaper manufacturer to get an understanding of your data and probably give you and maybe others a lot more insights. Is that a fair way to think about this?
That's a fair way to think about it, yes.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So again, the idea is that, right, if you look at it, what we have done is we've sort of created a cooperative environment amongst different suppliers who traditionally could be competing and are competing with each other.
Oh, yeah.
But what we have done is we have lifted everyone up. So the idea is that, if as an industry you sell more in a particular category, every supplier is going to benefit from it, right?
Yeah,
And
I think
that's
it's
the
phenomenal.
power of scale playing out.
I don't know if the depth of that information is sinking into a lot of startups here, but we'll make sure we'll settle it. So Sindhu, I know you've been working with startups here in Bangalore and other places across the world. How could we do more? How could the companies take advantage of that capability? And what else are you thinking? And maybe we'll get you to make a few announcements or at least talk about what your future is. But how else can they take advantage? This is one example. How else they could take advantage?
I mean, I think your examples were great. And just to reflect on the work we do in first, right? We've been running this startup accelerator at SAP, and probably most of you are aware of that. We've seeded a lot of the startups. Globally, we also have a startup program called SAP IO and SAP Foundries, where we are also seeding investment directly into startups. And besides that, here also in labs in Bangalore, we also have a startup accelerator program where we invite startups. We have a startup, it's called the Startup Studio, where we actually co-locate startups, young startups, and particularly in the emerging tech space as well. To sit there, we coach them. Like I said, we seed initial investments as well. But in order to help them scale, what is particularly interesting for most of the startups is, given the fact that 70% of the world's business transactions touch an SAP system, you can immediately think about the scale of what a startup can potentially have access to, right? And given the fact that we have more than 450,000 customers out there across 25 plus industries, what we quickly do is we match, also give the chance for the startup to quickly align their technology to, say, a particular business domain, right? And that they can start in a small scale, but then very quickly expand onwards. And I think that's what startups out there are absolutely seeking for, to get to that kind of scale very quickly, and giving them that access to that kind of scale very quickly. And this goes back to the point on also giving them guidance on what kind of business models, what kind of revenue streams that they should be potentially looking into, because it's not just about seeding an idea, but it's also about taking it to market, sustaining it, and being there, right? And that's where we are working with them quite a bit. And since you asked about announcements, don't want to make big announcements here, but at the same time, what we also do, we get the startups in front of potential investors as well. And annually, we also have what we call as a startup social event that's coming up actually right in November 27th. Awesome. So those of you interested, just feel free to reach out, and we'll be happy to bring you there, put you in contact with the industry, put you in contact with our business domain experts, where you can still stay focused on your area of expertise, but the opportunity to kind of expand and scale out is immense, right? Like I said, given the fact that we have access to more than 25 plus industries, and the business processes are so specific to each of these industries. I think that's the potential of working with SAP, and we're very proud to have made so many of these startups really successful. Many of them where we also go to market with jointly. So that's something that we are truly passionate about.
Thank you. The one thing which has been coming up in many conversations, and if you've missed AI, then you've been not paying attention, but everybody's talking about AI. But if you peel the layer a few more, right, besides rebranding yourself as AI and everything else, the lifeblood of AI is data, right? There's not a whole lot of data which many of these startups have access to. As much as they have phenomenal engineers, they're not going to be able to build deeper models or more accurate models or more predictable models, right? I want potentially all of you to maybe touch upon this and saying, what can we do? And because Coopetition is really going to come back there, which is, can we actually, build on each other's data? How, so thoughts on that, right? And you gave an example of using this particular, set of data which people can, but any other thoughts on that?
I'll take a start. So as we speak, we are leveraging, for example, one startup in Bangalore, where we are providing them access to our data so that they can fine tune their use cases, particularly with respect to tax data that we have.
Wonderful.
Right. But obviously we are doing it within our environment. We need to manage that.
Sure.
The second way.
Every data will have controls.
Yeah, it has controls associated, nothing.
So.
Yeah. Those things need to be managed and understood very well. But we are bringing the startup inside. Okay. And that's one way. But the second way, which is a more powerful way, which I alluded to earlier in the two of the examples, we have now got formal alliances with Pros and Stratio, which are AI-based startups. By bringing them as an alliance partner, right, their ability to access the data that we have, build use cases by industry, and go to the market together with us it just makes it a stronger proposition. So I'm saying there are two ways that we are addressing it, right? One is, of course, the Bangalore-based startup that I mentioned, which is still, I would say, a little tactical, but it is helping the startup mature. And the second is in a much more formal way, where the startup has achieved a certain level of maturity in its capability, and then you bring them as an alliance partner. That will allow them access to data. Yeah, at the end of the day, everything is revolving around data. Whoever controls the data.
Just if you have questions, think about it. We'll come back to you in a minute. But quick thoughts on data. Data sharing.
I think you talked about transformation in the industry, and if you just look at some of the beautiful examples of kind of where industries have changed their very conventional business models, I think it's all based on their access to data. I mean, you have fantastic examples of pump manufacturers no more selling pumps, but compressed air, right? Or even examples of hardcore drilling machine manufacturers, and not anymore selling these sophisticated drilling machines, but actually selling the number of holes that they drill, for example, right? Pay-as-you-go model. Now, how were they able to transform their industries and look at these kind of transformative business models? It's because of access to data, because they understood what is the customer experience, what is it that customers actually want from them, what is the service that is really the value-added service, and then kind of innovate along using technology to kind of address those kind of business models or the ways you go into market with. And so in that sense, also technology can play a very important role, and this is also why Again, going back to partners, together with Microsoft and Adobe, SAP came together and launched this Open Data Initiative. And the Open Data Initiative is all about access to data again in a controlled manner, of course, because again, if you look at customers, they usually, and if you're talking about customers who have data along infrastructures where if it's spread across SAP, Microsoft, or Adobe, again, we based on an open data model again. And once you base it on an open data model, you can bring data from all these sources into a common data lake and then use the data. Of course, the data is still owned by the organization that you operate in, but still at the same time, insights from the data you can use to derive some of these kind of changes in your business models or revenue streams or customer experiences that you want to target. And again, based on this open data initiative, we are also looking into how partners can work on this data to look at these insights and then offer value-added services based on those insights. So I think technology is a strong player in this to drive that kind of open data access, but still keeping the governance and control frameworks around it. No?
Perfect. I'll let you guys, think for a minute and with your parting thoughts. But any questions before we get to a quick closure? I know we're right before lunch. Okay, so while people think of questions, so I'd like each of you to maybe do a quick tweet or a few tweets on quick thoughts and how do you potentially want some of the startups to think about you and reach out to you and work with you, right? Let's make it very quickly actionable for each of the folks in the audience. Either of you can start.
So I think, for most of the startups in the ecosystem, we've generally engaged with them in a couple of different ways, right? Obviously, given our size and scale, we have engaged with them to do different POCs at various points in time, to be able to trial and roll out the solutions that can benefit our customers and can help grow their business. We also looked at them as a potential, acquisition target, whether it's an acqui-hire where we acquire them for the talent because they have got great talent and they've got some key technology that might be very useful in the context of our environment, our ecosystem. And then like I talked about the previous example of how we work with suppliers now, right? And we're extending that to other areas. For example, in India specifically, there's a lot of effort that's been going on of how do we better engage maybe directly with the farm community or through startups who are already in that space, where we can actually help accelerate the supply chains. Given the state of infrastructure in India, can we come in with our scale and help actually accelerate outcomes for the farming community or for the farmers who may not have access to the kind of markets and the kind of capital that they, that traditionally, but with Walmart's help, they can come in and we can give them access to that, right? And help them with go-to-market. And so we're looking at other opportunities in those areas through Walmart India primarily. But those are all just some examples of how we can actually work with the ecosystem at large. And again, I think the big benefit that we bring in is, our scale, right? I mean, I was smiling when Sindhu was talking about 70% of the transactions going through SAP. I can guarantee you a very big chunk of the 70% is through Walmart primarily, right?
Because you're one of our largest customers.
Exactly.
In that sense.
So I think that scale, bringing that power of the scale and, which can unlock all sorts of interesting opportunities for small companies, right?
I think that's very important because what you described is not just the common way of looking competition, right? It's okay, I've got a set of features. I sell a water bottle, that guy's another water bottle, and we compare sizes and colors and all of that stuff. But here, competition and coopetition is a completely different. You're talking about derivative suppliers being your customers and potentially reaching out to you. I don't know how many people in the audience would have thought I can go to a diaper manufacturer, chips manufacturer, a salsa manufacturer to reach out to, Walmart data. It's kind of phenomenal insight. So great. Arun?
Yeah, so there are 2 or 3 areas where I think we can have an immediate action in play. In the next 3 months, we are going to have a very formalized engagement with startups on certain emerging technologies in our Wave Space Innovation Center. The idea of that is 2 or 3 pronged. One is for us to get a better idea, and we're going to highlight which are those specific areas. It will let us know what is available in the market which is relevant to us. Now, whether we take that particular startup as an ecosystem partner, as an alliance partner, or even as a potential acquisition, it will open up threads. Sure. That will happen in the next 3 or 4 months, and we'll be working with NASSCOM and to publicize that. While that is at a strategic level, at a tactical level, I want to make an announcement. So, sure.
Hold the press, guys.
It's that. We understand that we all compete for talent.
Yes.
Okay. But what we are saying is it doesn't necessarily need to be talent that is hired in EY, right? So for us, it could be crowdsourcing of that talent. Which means that we are looking at leveraging the talent that you have by identifying certain, you may call them micro tasks, or you may call them certain body of work, which we can place out in the market, which you can do, obviously within the controls and the ambits of privacy and data privacy. So that platform is getting established, and we are going to bring some startups onto that platform as well, which will allow you to manage your talent, manage the IP around the work that you're doing, to establish a certain higher level of confidence as well that your IP is getting protected. So I think that way we can collaborate on talent rather than continuously competing on talent. Of course, we'll continue to do that as well, but this is another channel which I think
builds credibility for them.
It builds credibility, it builds confidence, it builds trust. See, at the end of the day, our entire objective is to build trust with our consumers, partners, and everyone, right? Then we can have far more meaningful dialogue.
So I think the clear direction is that, we all have to help our customers move in their digital journeys faster, and more efficiently, save money, build more insights, potentially get into more markets, or in many cases, just help them not get disrupted. Right? Let's be very honest. Many of our customers are just worried about getting disrupted by somebody somewhere they just don't know. Right? They haven't met, they haven't seen. Maybe the disruptor isn't even born yet. But it's the boardroom conversations definitely revolve around that, right? But for you to get to that scale and to help your customers, I think partnership, as you heard in different examples, is critical. So think at different levels, identify the competition. Maybe you don't even know who your competition is. Maybe you don't even understand who your partner is. But just think at different frames, different levels of the frame of who potentially you can partner with. So I think we'll stop there and see if there are any questions. Yes, the gentleman in the back.
We've spoken about 2 models. The first model is where, on Walmart, you're giving away that data to the suppliers for free, for companies to start building analytics on top. And the other one is where you have open data, where companies are coming together, pooling in data. But
I think there was a third discussion. Sorry, just to add, there was a third discussion where in a controlled environment, you come in and have access to more specific data depending on your level of engagement. Correct. And there are probably many more, but please keep going.
Correct. So in that context, what happens to pricing and ownership of that data and model, right? So when you're going as a cooperative environment, from the customer, when you get the data, who owns that data? And second is once you start building models, data becomes an asset. Data is the asset there. You start building better models. What happens to pricing in that kind of a cooperative environment?
Okay, how much time do we have for that discussion? So you want to...
Yeah, so I think first off, we, as the world's most trusted retailer, we are extremely conscious about the need to be, that we have to really continue to earn and keep the trust with customers, right? Which means protecting their privacy, protecting their data. So even in the retailing example, what we share is typically the performance of a particular category, not specific individual customer data, right? And that's going to be, that's continuing to be an ongoing challenge, frankly, as systems get more interconnected and so on. So I think it's just going to take a lot of diligence. And again, as long as you put the customer front and center and you're very, very conscious about the fact that, you should not be sharing things that the customer doesn't want shared, and you should ensure that the privacy of the customer is always protected and is paramount. And as long as you can continue to earn and keep the trust of the customer, then you won't get into trouble, right? I think if you start looking at sort of trying to think of interesting ways in which potentially you can either share or play with the data with other ecosystem players, that's when I think companies typically tend to get into sort of a slippery slope. So I think that's essentially what you'll have to do to avoid that.
I can't agree more. I mean, the whole privacy aspect is super important, right? I mean, there is no way around it. But at the same time, I think when we look at networks of players, and if you have suppliers or partners, there are certain ecosystems that you build around it where you have shared trust, and based on the governance that you agree on, then you can look at new kinds of models in which you can operate based on the insights that you have from the data, right? Again, based on the trust, based on the governance, there is no compromise around that. But at the same time, the power of having the network effect and the scaling out from those insights is definitely something that we all want to be privy to as well, right?
I think what your question provokes it and should be on everybody's mind is, do you have a view on how you think you should do it, right? I mean, the large companies will always have a view, and the battery of lawyers will say, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. But you should have a view. You should have a point of view which says, I can do this and protect your privacy and be able to do this. And what do you want to get paid for it? I don't think many of these models have been invented yet, right? As much as we have very smart consultants across the globe, there are many data models which are just likely to emerge, right? So think about what you want to do. Think about how you want to say, okay, well, I use this data, I trained my model, I got it, from percentage X to percentage Y, but then I always also invented in building the model, I got it to a certain percentage level with, some public data. So attributions and markups and numbers and data flows and, data lake accesses, and many people have charged these things based on number of times you access the lake. I don't think the book on that has been written up yet, right? So, go with what you think your business model is, and let some of the big guys tell you yes or no, and then maybe you can have a discussion. It would be, I don't think there's clear answers to that yet, but anything else? If not, we'll call it a wrap. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.